Chapter 1281, Magic Only for You. Michael was so flustered with hearing Cerberus' taunts that he completely forgot that he wasn't supposed to have magic. He had naturally used his magic to levitate the pieces on the board. He couldn't even hide the magic circle that appeared above his palms. This was complete evidence to the fact that he seemed to be the only person with magic. What the hell? Michael sighed. He had let down his guard simply because he had trusted Cerberus. So he also trusted Cerberus to keep his secret. This man was a genuine true friend of his. "I'm honestly not sure myself," he said to Cerberus. "But I guess I'm just too talented for the nascent influence to work on me. I was somehow able to override the power, allowing me to keep control over the mana in the air." Cerberus's eyes widened before it started to shimmer with thoughts. As a mystic master, he was knowledgeable in lots of intricate and esoteric things about mana. Theories popped up in Cerberus' mind, flashing through his mouth as muttering unintelligible words. And in the end, he was able to reach a satisfying conclusion. "It's because of your supreme talent," Cerberus realized. "Your command over mana is completely different from ordinary people like me." In front of a genius such as Michael, even a mystic master could be considered as an ordinary person. That was just how powerful a supreme talent was. It was tyrannical in how they completely dominated a single piece of nature, and for Michael, that was magic itself. This proves that we're right," Cerberus exclaimed. "It's a tremendous weight off our shoulders if I'm going to be honest with you." Cerberus then explained to Michael about how the majority of people had come to believe that magic and mana had disappeared permanently. However, the Guild of Arcana was of the opinion that mana was just invisible to them now. The nascent influence had created an invisible barrier that prevented people from accessing that layer of reality with mana. But that didn't mean that they had destroyed or made mana disappear. But now Michael was the definite evidence to their theories. Magic still existed. "Ha ha ha ha, my boy," Cerberus hugged Michael with intensity. There was a proud look on his face that made Michael warm on the inside. "I didn't want to reveal that I had magic. It could cause undue stress to my company. I don't think the ersatz would let someone like me alive if they knew I still wielded magic." This made Cerberus sober up. Initially, he had been thinking about sharing this news to the Guild of Arcana, but now that Michael pointed out the obvious flaw to that plan, he immediately scrapped it out. You're right, Cerberus acceded. Ersatz won't assassinate you if they find out. However, they will be interested in why you are able to still wield magic, which will be either good or bad for you depending on how you interpret that. Still, it is good precaution to keep this a secret. As much as I wanted to brag to my peers about the genius that is my student, it seems that I have to keep my mouth shut with this one. Michael nodded, agreeing with Cerberus. "How does it feel, magic?" Cerberus asked. The mystic master had adjusted well with the disappearance of magic. However, the wistful tone in his voice betrayed his true emotions. Deep inside, he was missing that power in his core, that mystical swirl of power that had become nature to his body. He hoped that he could live vicariously through Michael. "Relax," Michael said to Cerberus. "Take a drink first." Cerberus took the cup of water in Michael's hands and shook his head. "Sorry, got a little bit excited there." Seeing this scene, Michael couldn't help but feel sad for his old friend. Were the age lines on his face this deep? "It's not a permanent solution, but..." Michael raised his hand, using the power inside his magnetic core. Immediately, a wave of sonorous sensation emanated from him and directly affected Cerberus. The mystic master's eyes widened when he realized that Michael was using his nascent influence on him. And before he could be surprised about the fact that Michael was now a nascent spirit cultivator, Cerberus was suddenly inundated with a warm feeling in his core. "Pftttt," Cerberus spat out the water he was drinking. Michael smiled. It seemed that things didn't really change. Cerberus' eyes widened with utter and complete shock. His cores, they were being filled with magic. Mana was surging towards his body at a commensurate rate. The mana that he thought he wouldn't be able to see for so long, it's back, it's here. He immediately turned towards Michael for an explanation. I realize that if I use my nascent influence, I can temporarily allow someone to use magic, but it's not going to last long. After a few hours, that magic will dissipate again. But before Michael could explain further, Cerberus gave him another big hug. This time, tears streaked off the old man's cheeks. Who was cutting onions? Michael ought to find out because he too was tearing up a little bit. It doesn't matter, Cerberus said. Just the fact that I can feel magic again is enough of a gift, even if it's just temporary. Michael smiled. Finding and defeating the ersatz was worth it just to have his old friend regain his magic back. After a while, Cerberus settled down, and using his mana, he used a simple magic circle to manufacture a special chess board commemorating this special moment. Michael could tell that this brought great joy to the mystic master, much more than using some grand 9-star magic spell. The two of them spent the rest of the day catching up to each other while playing chess. As it turned out, Cerberus had been in the Guild of Arcana this entire time, and the reason seemed to be because of him. I was trying to convince my peers about your legitimacy as a mystic master. Chapter 1282, Legitimacy. Me a mystic master. Cerberus scoffed at Michael's surprise. Don't pretend, your talent in magic is unmatched. You are better at conjuring magic circles than even some mystic masters. Then there was the thing about your supreme talent. Actually, that was my intention on visiting the guild. What do you mean? Michael was utterly confused. What do you really know about supreme talents? Cerberus asked. From what Michael knew, only supreme beings had supreme talents. The Ocean King, the Draconian Queen, the Monster Queen, they all have supreme talents. Cerberus nodded at his answer. Yes, supreme beings are the leader of their entire species. How do you think that happens? Michael had admittedly no idea. I don't know, some kind of electoral vote, a tournament to decide who's the strongest. The mystic master shook his head with seriousness. No, the supreme being decides. Once someone with supreme talent is born within a species, it becomes immediately clear that their strength and talent is so far above that of others. Within a generation, that supreme being will grow up and naturally take control of the species, either through force or through voluntary submission from his subjects. Michael hadn't really thought about the logistics of supreme beings. He just accepted them as the overlords that reigned over their entire species. But then, what did it mean that he had a supreme talent? His face started to twist at the thought. I see you've realized, Cerberus said. Since you have a supreme talent, this naturally means that you will eventually lead the entire human species. And before Michael could object, Cerberus raised his hand and continued his explanation. It's inevitable, he said. Without you even knowing it, you've already started on your true fate. Michael looked down at the signet ring on his pinky finger. It showed the emblem of the Reborn Company. It was true, he'd long thought about wanting to spread his ideals to the entire world, let them experience the comfort and joy he had experienced. But he never thought that that was because of his supreme talent, that he had been doing that because of some kind of fate. Now, I know you would never want the entire humanity to submit to your rule like some despot, but you don't have to, you can just continue to do as you've been doing with your company. You've already conquered and united the King's region and the Lower Queen's region. If you continue onwards, you'll unite the entire royal continent, and by then you'll basically have the entirety of humanity by your side. Then, Cerberus put a hand on Michael's shoulders. But of course, you're going to experience some backlash. People will not want to be ruled by you or anyone for that matter, even if you have the best intentions. That is why you'll need more allies, more friends, and the best way to do that is to have people realize that you have the potential to become a supreme being. Once the word is out there will be people who will submit to your rule simply because it's what they think is right. They believe in your supreme talent. I believe that the Guild of Arcana can be that ally of yours. We have scrolls that specifically prophesize a supreme being leading humanity through the darkest times. If those wizards find out about your supreme talent, then we'll offer their magic to you. However, like in all organizations, there will be some conflict. Some will not want to accept you as a potential supreme being, Some will not believe it, some will just defy you even if they know the truth. That's just what happens. That's why it's better if you legitimize yourself as a mystic master first. Once you have that title, people will more likely accept you as a supreme being in the future. Michael heard Cerberus' words and just stayed silent the whole time, ruminating about this supposed fate that he was supposed to have. It all went over his head. He just wanted to progress his company. Why did it have to be complicated? In truth, I did not want to reveal this to you so soon. Only once I was able to convince some of my peers will I tell it to you. But then, magic disappeared, and then I found out that you are neglecting your magical studies, only being in the fifth circle. I thought for sure that they won't accept your legitimacy, but then you showed me this. Your supreme talent is showing in full force. Michael took a deep breath. So you want me to be a mystic master so that I'll be accepted as a supreme being in the future? Yes, Cerberus replied. I'm nowhere near the level to become a supreme being. As you said, I'm only in the fifth circle, and it was only now did I find out that ninth circle mages have some kind of power that is comparable to ability power and nascent influence. Cerberus raised his hand, fire bursted out from the tips of his fingers. Michael noted that this wasn't the magic he gave Cerberus. This fire was made out of that very same power that allowed the pumpkin carriages to float. We call this the arcanic sorcery. It's the culmination of all the knowledge a wizard had learned throughout his entire life. And yes, it is comparable to nascent influence, but if I am going to be honest, I believe it to be superior to even that. After all, arcanic sorcery has a lot more freedom and versatility compared to magnetics. Arcanic sorcery, how will I learn how to use that? Cerberus smiled, advanced to the ninth circle, easy. As if. However, the mystic master shook his head. With your talent, it is feasible, you just have to concentrate your power on it, give it the same effort as you would with your God-forged cultivation. Michael inwardly nodded, but it was hard to do so. He was still trying to remove the discrimination he had against magic. Chapter 1283, Welcoming Celebrations. Teresa paced back and forth in her camp. She simply couldn't understand why the Guild of Arcana was stopping by the Reborn company. She bit her lips. It's a play, she realized. They're taking their sweet time in order to squeeze out more from me. After all, what else did they go to the Rebornian camp for? By making it seem as if they weren't in a hurry to exchange goods with Teresa and the Goldstone Company, then the Guild of Arcana would have a lot more leeway when it came to their negotiations later. They're probably talking with the leader of Reborn, asking them if they have something that they can offer to them in exchange for the ice petals of the frozen lotus, which means they'll know what I'm after. I'm willing to bet they're going to do the same thing with the Vanderbilt camp. The leader of Reborn probably won't know the reason why I'm after those petals, but Levi, he'll immediately know what I'm up to, and he'll want to be the first one to do it, Teresa said to her advisors. And just like she suspected, a day later, the Guild of Arcana's caravan moved on from the Rebornian company and they immediately moved towards the Vanderbilt's side of the chasm. I didn't think they would be this political, Teresa thought to herself. They're playing it well. Who could have planned this amongst them? Cerberus is way too passive to do it. Lazarus is too disinterested in things like this. Could it be those other mystic masters? No matter, I have what they need. They can't sell the petals to anyone else because they are desperate to learn the locations of the ersatz strongholds. The venerable Cerberus Agendor. Levi welcomed Cerberus with open arms. He had his camp prepare a red velvet walkway for the mystic master and his caravan of wizards. There were extravagant music and everything else. I humbly thank you for accepting my invitation. Forgive me if I was only able to prepare such meager celebrations for your arrival, but worry not. Tomorrow night our preparations for the feast will be complete. Cerberus walked forward and shook hands with the Vanderbilt. He couldn't help but put Michael's face with Levi. The two bore only the slightest similarity with their golden hair and sharp features. However, Levi didn't have that invisible characteristic that made Michael such an impressive character. It's my pleasure, Cerberus said respectfully. I must admit I didn't think you would accept, said Levi. were the goldstones not favorable? Cerberus simply smiled and didn't deign to answer Levi's pointed question. In truth, he was supposed to go over towards the Goldstone camp to start their negotiations with Teresa as soon as possible. Lazarus had been getting impatient after all. It won't be long before he'll want to dig up some graves. That was what he planned to do. However, meeting Michael had completely changed his trajectory. Michael wanted to meet with Lazarus, and unfortunately, Lazarus wouldn't want to meet with anyone else other than who he's supposed to meet. But if they immediately went over to Goldstone's camp, then Teresa would immediately prevent anyone else from entering their camp, meaning Michael would not have the opportunity to speak with Lazarus. So he decided to meet with the Vanderbilts. Since it was a welcoming feast, it wouldn't be weird for him to invite the Rebornians over with him. Of course, he still asked for Levi's permission, which he easily said yes to. Levi would want to do anything to earn Cerberus' favor, so inviting a few other people wasn't a problem. "You seem to have a good relationship with this reborn company," Levi said. "Yes, my student is in their camp," Cerberus said. "I see." Levi didn't seem suspicious of this. He wouldn't have ever thought that their leader himself would be the so-called student of Cerberus. "Inviting them is of no consequence to me. I only worry that this would prompt Teresa to invite herself as well." Cerberus smiled. He wanted that to happen so that he could manufacture a meeting with Lazarus and Michael. "Is there a problem with that?" No, the more the merrier," my father used to say. "Good, I'll be looking forward to the celebrations." Michael walked through the Vanderbilt camp with Cerberus and the Dragonborns minus Zion at his side. Their appearance caused a lot of looks to go their way, some curious, some surprised, and some were harboring a little bit of disdain. They didn't think a lower echelon company should be allowed in their feast. Michael ignored them. Instead, he focused on the celebrations instead. A large table, spanning multiple meters long, contained all sorts of food that would satisfy even the hungriest draconian. It contained exotic meats, mystical plants, and other such types that would be appropriate to any species that was invited. But despite the delicious feast presented upon them, no one ate a single bite. It was as if the food was frozen in stasis, which wasn't that hard to imagine. The coldness between the two sides of the table was palpable even from afar. On one side contained a group of people with distinct blonde hair, austere uniformed clothes, and a chin that seemed to be permanently raised up in a sneer. These were the Vanderbilts, and at the very center of the table was their leader, Levi. He was the only one that presented a smile. If it wasn't genuine, he gave no indication that it was. Opposite him were a motley group of crew. Some looked like bandits wearing a mismatch of tattered clothes, some looked like royals, and some looked like musicians. These were the coalition of the Goldstone conglomerate. A woman with red, curly hair sat primly at their center, drinking a cup of tea with her pinky raised up. The two sides were at a stalemate. It wasn't until Michael arrived with Cerberus did they finally tear their gazes away from each other. They all looked at the man who dared to create a third faction in the Chasma and observed him. Chapter 1284, Political Warfare. Michael felt their piercing eyes analyzing every bit of his clothes and attitude. They were assessing him and everyone else beside him. The Dragonborns took it better than him. Zion looked bored, Shayna kept her composure, and Yumisu just slinked back behind her sister. "Ah, so you are Michael?" Levi asked, standing up. "I've heard great rumors about you. I'm quite curious to see if any of them are true." A chuckle came from the other side of the table. "Funny, perhaps that's the only thing we're going to be agreeing on," Levi said. Teresa, the youngest nascent spirit cultivator, they said. As soon as she said that, gasps rang out from the people around the feast. The only people who knew about that fact were the upper echelon elites. It wasn't spread around to the general public. What, a young kid like him is a nascent spirit cultivator? Michael took their questions confidently. "Well, would you like to find out?" Seeing such a response, Teresa laughed to herself before looking at Levi. "Well." Levi frowned. He could tell that Teresa was once again manipulating the strings. She was trying to pit the two of them against each other. "That would be mighty rude of me," Levi said. Don't take my words as a challenge, friend, I meant it in good faith. Welcome to the feast. After those words, the two conglomerate leaders turned their attention elsewhere. They seemed to be talking and conversing with their own people, or sometimes with people from outside their circle and camp. Though Michael could tell that they had one eye open towards him, they just didn't show it. They especially focused their attention on the wizards of the Guild of Arcana. It was quite a sight to see. Cerberus was being ripped from one conversation to another. One second he was talking with Levi and the next, Teresa would interject and capture the mystic master's attention and vice versa. Michael realized that this was the prelude to their fight, a taster to the real negotiations they were to have later. And it seemed that they were not the only ones making preparations. The other officers of the conglomerates were making their moves on the wizards of the Guild of Arcana. An officer from the Vanderbilts was trying to seduce one of the mages. Meanwhile, one of the companies from Goldstone's coalition was trying to strike up a business conversation with a wizard, offering their services. It was a political game playing out in real time. It was an invisible battle going on between the two conglomerate leaders being played through conversation and wordplay. And right now, no one was winning. Cerberus remained neutrality, and he's the only one that mattered. They were so focused on Cerberus that they were completely ignoring Michael. He was able to observe everything while sitting by the sidelines. Then he saw a shift. Levi made his move. So, Cerberus, I heard that you're busy campaigning something back in the Guild of Arcana estate. Why make the trip here? Levi's question was played as if it was a casual conversation. He even took a drink while talking to sell it. However, Teresa knew immediately that he was just trying to find out why Cerberus was here in the chasm, wanting to meet with her. Teresa here wanted to meet with Lazarus. Have you heard about the ice petals of the frozen lotus? Cerberus said, seemingly intoxicated. Hearing this, Teresa couldn't hide her wince. She saw that look of surprise in Levi's eyes, and it was at that moment that she knew he knew what she wanted to do. Ah, I see, quite the rare material, very useful in training, Levi said with a raised eyebrow. Even he couldn't help but let a smirk grow on his face. After all, it would seem that he was winning the conversation. He'd successfully primed Cerberus to reveal his intentions. But Michael knew the truth. Cerberus was just trying to play the game as a way to help him. Speaking of which, where is our esteemed mystic master? Asked Teresa. I would like to finally meet the undead wizard of Arcana. Teresa wanted to meet with Lazarus now, before Levi could get the chance to screw up her plans. I'm here. Michael turned towards the entrance of the Vanderbilt camp and saw a gloomy, goth man approaching the table. This man looked edgy. He was the stereotypical goth caricature with the overgrown bangs that covered half his face, the black makeup circling his eyes, and his too pale skin. He even had rings on his nose and ears. He certainly didn't look like the typical mystic master that everyone thought of. And if Michael couldn't sense that tremendously powerful magic aura emanating off of the guy, then he too would think that it was just another goth kid lost from some convention. I was too busy with my research, can't have them decay before I've done my studies. Michael didn't want to know what kind of subject he was dissecting. Lazarus cadaver, Teresa called out. She immediately got up out of her seat and curtsied towards him. The mystic master awkwardly copied her movements, but from an outsider perspective it would just look like he was getting ready to pounce on her. It's so nice to finally meet you, Teresa said. I'm sure the Guild of Arcana has told you about my request. Lazarus cracked his neck, looking weirdly too cracked. Yes, I've heard. The ice petals, you're the only one who can grow them. I would like to purchase them from you. Levi got up immediately. Teresa, what kind of negotiation is that? You hardly even talked to the man. Mr. Lazarus, can I call you Lazarus? My name is Levi and I am the owner of the largest overseas branch of the Vanderbilt Company. I have contacts all over the world. A single letter from me and they can procure any rare and endangered species for your studies. Give me the petals. Chapter 1285, Conglomerate Secrets. Immediately, Michael could feel Teresa's annoyance with Levi's words. Unfortunately for her, she had no answer for his kind of offer. The Goldstone conglomerates' strength came from their various real estates all over the world. However, Teresa's branch only focused on the royal continent, and unfortunately for her, it was widely known that Lazarus had already scoured the entire continent for his subjects. The mystic master had set his sights overseas. And coincidentally, Levi specifically dealt with the biggest branch of the Vanderbilt Company overseas. He wasn't kidding when he said that he'd be able to give Lazarus many dissectable corpses from a variety of species not found in the royal continent. "What about it?" Levi asked. "Give those ice petals to me and I shall give you the subjects you want. I heard the more exotic they are, the better it will be for your studies." Lazarus' cadaver tilted his head, seemingly considering the offer. "I would like that." Levi's countenance brightened up while Teresa's turned into a scowl. "But I've recently had a lack of resources at the moment. My ice petals have not been producing at the same amount. I do not have any to give away." Immediately, this caused the two conglomerate leaders to stand up. "But we've had an agreement," Teresa shouted. "The Guild of Arcana has already assured me that you will be able to provide the ice petals that I needed." Lazarus kept his cool composure. "They assured you I did not." Teresa turned to Cerberus. "Sir Cerberus," her eyes were filled with pleading, if there was anyone that could help her convince Lazarus, then it would be another mystic master. However, Cerberus could only shrug. "I'm sorry, we mystic masters have a pact to leave each other's businesses alone." Michael could tell that Teresa wanted to say more, but she immediately realized that she was dealing with a mystic master. Two of them, in fact. They may be a part of the Guild of Arcana, but that didn't mean they were shackled by them. With the kind of power they had, any of the mystic masters could do whatever they wanted without any problems. Even conglomerates had no hold over them. Teresa immediately realized that her bargaining powers were fruitless in this conversation. She immediately withdrew within herself, her eyes flashing with thought. Meanwhile, Levi immediately saw that look on Lazarus' face. He was able to take advantage of it and ask the right questions. "Then what will gain your surety? Surely you wouldn't have come here if you weren't planning on trading with us." Sure enough, Lazarus nodded. "Yes, I took the time to visit this place because it has a lot of interesting things that I want, but most of all I want something in particular. I want the magical monsters." As soon as he said that, both conglomerate leaders started. Their eyes narrowed. This was a serious conversation. "Where have you heard about that?" Levi asked. And for the first time, Michael saw something quite interesting. Levi and Teresa both made eye contact. And it was not the kind of stare that was filled with challenge. It was a conspiratorial kind of stare. Michael had no idea what they were talking about, but he was starting to get an idea about what happened. It seemed that this magical monster was something that both Levi and Teresa had agreed to keep a secret. For all their skirmishes, their disagreements, and their rivalries, the two conglomerate leaders chose to work together to suppress information from coming out. But it seemed that they didn't do a good enough job on it. Lazarus was able to find out. "Bu-22." Michael heard the sounds of the orc chieftains whispering in his ear. "We apologize, Supreme Leader. We did not know about the presence of the magical monsters." "What are they anyway?" Michael asked. "We have been looking around the chasm for a while now, Ra-ta-ta, and throughout our information gathering we have heard about whisperings and rumors spreading around it. We knew that the conglomerates were trying to hide something, but we just didn't know what. We apologize for our incompetence. It seemed that magical monsters were present here in the chasm and that the conglomerates were trying their hardest to suppress anyone else from finding out. The shadow orcs were feeling sorry for not finding out about it sooner, but Michael didn't hold it against them. After all, they were conglomerates. Levi was in control of the fourth largest branch in the Vanderbilt Company. Of course they would have strong anti-espionage defenses in place. They probably had a nascent spirit cultivator taking charge of that, which was why the shadow orcs were unable to break through it. It was already impressive that the orcs found out that there was a conspiracy and was able to get away without the conglomerates finding out about it. "I want their corpses," demanded Lazarus. And finally, Levi turned to look at Michael again. His eyes narrowed before looking around him beyond the walls of his own camp. All right, but not here. It is not appropriate to talk where there are too many ears listening. Teresa immediately stepped up. I can provide a private place for us to talk. My place will. It will not suffice, Teresa said, cutting off Levi. And you know it, it will serve us both better if you use my resources for this. Levi bit his lips, but he eventually nodded and agreed with her assessment. She had possession of many pocket dimensions which she could use as a distraction or a decoy if anyone ever tried to listen in to their conversation. But no one else, Levi said, saying it to everyone, but Michael could tell that he was being singled out for this. Reborn may have their own camp, but that didn't mean he was considered as a real faction. They were just being allowed to exist there. And as they were about to walk away, Michael spoke up. If I may, Mr. Lazarus, I would like to know whether you have more information about the Zephyrs. Chapter 1286, Decaying Hands. Michael wasn't going to let his chance slip away, so he immediately pulled out something that the two other conglomerate leaders were probably unaware of. And it seemed that it had certainly piqued the undead mystic master's attention. Yous know about my work. Levi and Teresa both looked panicked. They immediately turned to their own officers, to their advisors. Michael could tell that they were all trying to figure out what Michael was talking about. But this wouldn't appear in any of their investigations. Even Teresa, in her preparation to meet with Lazarus, finding out everything there was to know about the man, she still didn't know what Michael was talking about. After all, that book was something that was supposed to only be accessed by the Guild of Arcana. I've read about it, Michael said. It's interesting what you wrote. You think that Zephyrs are the antithesis of the elves, and that they evolved to become their natural enemies. Lazarus turned to look at Michael, seemingly observing him. Then he narrowed his eyes at Michael's subtle challenge. You don't think that I was right? Michael shrugged. I just don't think that the Zephyrs evolved in order to destroy the elves. The undead mystic master walked towards Michael. Then what do you think? I think they're there to help the elves. Lazarus was eerily silent as he stared face to face against Michael. There was no subtle movement in his body, no beating of the heart, no blood pumping in his veins. He was eerily still, as if he was some kind of corpse that had been turned into wax. Interesting, you smell the opposite of me, Lazarus said. Then Lazarus took out a decaying hand from one of his pocket dimension rings. Immediately, people recoiled after smelling the rot coming off the hand. Is he going to become my enemy? Lazarus asked the hand. Crack! The ring finger suddenly folded backwards, dislocating the bones in multiple places. Then, a voice as light as the air but as eerie as death itself whispered out of the hand. No. Satisfied, Lazarus turned to Michael and offered him a handshake. Then, it is nice to meet you. Michael was hesitant on what to do. Oh, Lazarus said. He forgot to take the hand back to his ring, so Michael thought he was being offered the magical decaying hand. There. Michael and Lazarus shook hands. I still don't think you're right, but I value your input. Everyone was silent as they watched the two of them interact. Meanwhile, Levi and Teresa both couldn't take their eyes off of the ring in Lazarus' finger. They were entirely focused on the hand that he had just brought out. And a realization was brought out to them. That was how Lazarus figured out that they were hiding something here in the chasm. They'd long heard about the infamous monkey's paw. They'd heard that it was omniscient and that it knew everything there was to know about the world as long as you asked it the right questions. But they'd always thought that it was just a myth. When they were kids, they just thought it was a way to scare children into going to their beds early. Immediately, their attitudes turned subdued as they realized that they'd been underestimating Lazarus this entire time. They couldn't deal with him the way they do normal people. Out of all the mystic masters, he was not the strongest, but he was the most mysterious. His powers were still unknown to everyone, meaning he was the most dangerous out of all of them. And right now, Michael was shaking hands with such an individual. We'll talk later, once I'm done with this. Maybe a week later. I have more corpses to study, Lazarus said, slurring his words a little bit. Lazarus turned out to join Teresa and Levi. I can prove it to you, he said to Lazarus. The Forbidden Islands, I've been there. This time, Lazarus put on a serious face. No one has been there, not since I did, 10 years ago. It's true, why don't you ask that hand again? Lazarus eyed Michael. What do you want? Let me join you on that conversation with them, Michael said, gesturing to the two conglomerate leaders, whose eyes widened once they realized what he was trying to do. It didn't take the undead mystic master a lot of time to think. All right, but after you'll tell me everything you know about zephyrs. They're the only species I can't understand. Michael smiled, satisfied with himself. It was basically a win-win situation. The reason why he wanted to talk with Lazarus was to talk about the zephyrs in the first place, and now he was able to leverage that to an invitation with their private talk. He's coming with me, Lazarus said to Levi and Teresa. Both of them flashed a forced smile. Of course, I welcome you, leader of Reborn, said Levi. Teresa's nascent armor manifested around her. Moss, earth, and land and sea covered her entire body, making it seem as if the entire world had become her armor. Follow close behind me or else the void will take you, she said, before stroking a line in front of her. A division in reality appeared, showing multiple layers of pocket dimensions underneath. Done with her job, Teresa took off her nascent armor and stepped forwards. Levi followed close behind. Lazarus peered to the rift in reality warily, before eventually jumping in feet first as if he was diving into a pool. Before Michael stepped forwards and followed suit, he looked back and turned to the Dragonborns. He didn't have to say anything to Shayna. Do not worry, Lord Michael, we will take care of everything here. He nodded. Try to investigate the magical monsters in the chasm, he commanded the shadow orcs through magic. Bu-22. Ra-ta-ta. With both conglomerate leaders out, this was the best opportunity they were going to get to start investigating on the secrets they were trying so hard to keep. Chapter 1287, Magical Monster. Michael followed suit. Finding himself on the other side of Teresa's pocket dimension. It was a dungeon, one that seemed to be many meters underground with thick walls that separated it from the soil around it. I smell death, Lazarus said. Levi nodded but didn't specify anything more. He led the group forwards, finding themselves towards the end of the dungeon where there was a large creature laying on the ground. Michael immediately had his guard up, but then he noticed that this creature wasn't moving at all. In fact, it had no light mana signature, meaning that it was completely dead and decaying. And judging from the amount of dark mana around it, this corpse had been here for a long time. Teresa snapped her fingers and suddenly fire erupted on the torches to the side, illuminating the entire dungeon. Michael and Levi could finally see the creature laying on the ground. How magnificent, Levi remarked. He gave no care for the obvious macabre situation and approached the corpse, using his hands to prod through decaying flesh. Meanwhile, Michael just stood there completely shocked. After all, the creature he was looking at was the very same monster that had attacked New Sparta. I assume you recognize this, Michael, said Levi. How did you get it? Michael asked. As far as I know, all the corpses back then were completely disposed of. With the resources in a conglomerate, Michael had no doubt that it would be easy for them to sneak a single corpse for them to study. But it seemed that his guess had been wrong. You're right, but we didn't get this corpse from New Sparta, said Levi. We got it from the chasm. What? This was a complete shock to Michael. Wasn't this monster commanded by the ersatz? Did that mean that they were here in the chasm? What did that mean for the demi-humans making their homes underground? Were they a part of ersatz? All of those thoughts ran into his mind, but unfortunately it seemed that even the two conglomerate leaders had no idea. This is the very reason why we haven't been able to conquer the chasm even now, Teresa said. These monsters can be as strong as a nascent spirit cultivator, and if you venture too deep into the chasm, you may run into an entire army of them. We decided to name them magical monsters for now. Things were finally making sense. Those demi-humans, although crafty and scrappy in their own right, could never repel the forces of a conglomerate, especially two of them. But as it turned out, they were not the only enemy these conglomerates were facing. They fought against monsters too. Do they work alongside the demi-humans? Michael asked. Levi and Teresa both looked at each other. We've seen no signs of the demi-humans commanding or communicating with the magical monsters. But every time we corner the demi-humans, the magical monsters seem to coincidentally appear just in time to save them, said Levi. But they may not be necessarily working together, Teresa countered. My soldiers have seen demi-humans getting crushed by the magical monsters sometimes. My best guess is that the demi-humans know how to manipulate these magical monsters to their advantage. Maybe they lure those monsters out of their lairs and push them to our soldiers, causing us to eliminate each other. Levi didn't seem to agree with Teresa's conclusion. They're the demi-humans' dogs, that's why I wanted to attack the demi-humans in the first place. Destroy them, we destroy the coordination of those magical monsters. But what if they're the only ones keeping the magical monsters at bay? We don't know anything about these creatures, Teresa said. It's not smart. Lazarus' cool words immediately abated the heating conversation between the two rivaling leaders. What do you mean? Levi asked. This creature runs purely on instinct, Lazarus answered, prodding the decaying brain on the creature's exposed skull. It does not have the capacity to think for itself, that's for sure. The undead mystic master looked completely elated as he continued to study the creature. I've long wanted to get a hand on this, he said. I wanted to find out how these creatures got so strong and how the ersatz were able to take control of them. So can you? Teresa asked. If we find out more about this creature, we'll be better prepared once we conquer the chasm. Ever since they had discovered that these creatures lived underground, conquering the chasm became not just only a business opportunity, but also a preventative measure. No one wanted another disaster like the one in New Sparta. I won't be satisfied with just one corpse, Lazarus demanded. I'll need more, 10 at the very least, and I want them to be incredibly fresh, preferably a body that hasn't died yet but is on the brink of succumbing to its injuries. And if that wasn't enough, Lazarus sweetened the deal. Whoever can provide me with those conditions will win the ice battles. This was very much an alluring offer. However, it was not as easy as Lazarus was implying. These magical monsters were the equivalent of a nascent spirit cultivator's power. If they could defeat that many magical monsters, then they wouldn't have asked for Lazarus' help with the ice battles. That was exactly the reason why they wanted it in the first place. If you give me the ice battles, I can give you more corpses. It's not going to be as many as 10 bodies, but I can promise at least 1 or 2, Teresa said. Deal, Lazarus immediately said. Wait, I haven't made my offer yet, Levi complained. My soldiers will be better equipped to fight those magical monsters. Those ice battles will be more useful to us. Too late, Teresa exclaimed as Lazarus handed her the pocket dimension ring containing the ice battles. Seeing this, Levi knew that the fight was over, but that didn't mean he lost the war. If he could kill more of those magical monsters, perhaps Lazarus would change his mind. Meanwhile, Michael remained silent. There was just one question on his mind. Why did you keep it a secret? Chapter 1288, Opportunity or Risk. The two conglomerate leaders were a bit caught off guard when Michael asked this question. After all, both Teresa and Levi never actively talked to each other when they made this decision. They both found out about the presence of the magical monsters separately, but they made the joint decision of keeping it a secret. They both knew that the other was aware of this. Why? Levi asked, tilting his head. As a company leader, you should know this. Seeing Michael still confused, Teresa took the initiative to explain. It's because it's an opportunity. These magical monsters are dangerous. For now, that will all change once we are able to dissect them and learn everything there was to know about their biology. And then we domesticate them. Imagine raising an army of monsters, each one having the strength of a nascent spirit cultivator. I'll be unstoppable. Hearing their explanations, Michael couldn't help but inwardly shake his head in disappointment. Greed, that was the answer. Of course, it's not like he couldn't see their reasoning. The ersatz had already figured out the way to take control of these magical monsters. How else were they able to sick them onto New Sparta? Teresa and Levi were just trying to level the playing field. They were helping humanity in their eyes. And if that's all what they were trying to do, then Michael wouldn't have minded it. However, by keeping these monsters as a secret, they're actively sabotaging humanity. There were adventuring parties and individual companies coming to the chasm in the hopes of striking it rich by being the first conquerors of this underground haven. They didn't know they were getting fed to the sharks. If they truly wanted to help humanity, they would have offered the opportunity to study these creatures to those more capable. Instead, they wanted to take this opportunity to be the pioneer. And it's not like Michael abhorred that thought. Just like Levi said, this was probably what he should be doing. If he wanted to climb up the rankings and reach the top of the world, he'd need to make selfish decisions that benefited Reborn out of everything else. But he was not them. He didn't want to conquer the world, he wanted to unite it. Michael soon left Teresa's pocket dimension, with Levi following him soon after. They left Teresa and Lazarus behind. The Mystic Master was simply too enamored with his research to leave, and Teresa would be busy using the ice petals for whatever purpose she had for it. "Michael, can we talk?" Levi said, leaning on a wall with his hands behind his back. "What do you think about us joining forces?" "This was unexpected. I thought your company was sufficient enough," Michael replied. Levi Vanderbilt cleared his throat. "To be honest, I thought that was the case. But with Teresa obtaining the ice petals, I have a feeling that she'll be acquiring a very powerful ally by her side soon." Michael was still planning on talking with the demi-humans in the chasm. He'd certainly have it easier if he worked with Levi. "But we can't work together," Michael said. "You and I both have completely different goals in the chasm." Levi frowned a little bit. "So you're planning on sieging the chasm all on your own? I would understand if it was before, but now you know the monsters laying in wait there. You're sending your men to a suicide mission." Michael shook his head. "I disagree. His men trusted him, so this time he wanted to trust his men. If they said that they wanted to conquer the chasm and save the demi-humans there, then he'll believe them. And he equipped them the best he could. He was sure they could handle this." Seeing his expression, Levi knew he wouldn't be able to convince Michael. "It's your loss," he said. "It would be best if we avoided each other in the chasm. A lot of confusion in that maze." It was a subtle threat, but Michael didn't take it to heart. Levi didn't have the best reputation, but he wasn't the kind to kill in cold blood. He was just trying to make Michael back off. Once they finished their discussion, the two went their separate ways. Not even a few minutes after he left their camp, he saw the Vanderbilt soldiers moving with great gusto. Levi had ordered them to start preparing a siege onto the chasm as soon as possible. It was Levi's only chance. He had to act now before Teresa could use that ice petals to her advantage. About an hour later, the entire chasm went into an uproar as they saw the Vanderbilt army marching towards the lip before descending into the depths. "Whoa, looks like Levi wants to conquer the chasm now. What are the Goldstones doing? Why aren't they matching the Vanderbilts? They'll fall behind at this rate." "Maybe that's their tactics. Let the Vanderbilts do all the work so that they can sweep at the end and take the prize." People were quick to realize that this wasn't a simple trip to the chasm. The Vanderbilts had deployed essentially their entire troops. They were going all in. Because of this, some independent adventuring parties and companies decided to go with them. They thought the Vanderbilts had found some kind of treasure in the chasm. Why else were they in a hurry? And a while later, another surge of movement arrived in the chasm. This time, it was the Goldstones. But unlike Levi, Teresa had only deployed a small amount of her army towards the chasm. A single battalion, the same one she had been deploying during their usual mission underground. However, anyone could see that the Goldstones were also preparing a full frontal assault on the chasm. Supply lines were getting arranged. Men were getting armed. They were just waiting for the eventual go-ahead from Teresa. And after them, a different army marched forth. Numbering 15,000, the Rebornians made their way towards the chasm. Many underestimated them. They thought their shiny armor was an indication of their lack of experience. Only a few were able to see that there was something different with the way those metals gleamed. Chapter 1289, Into the Chasm. Michael led the Rebornian army down towards the depths of the chasm. The staircase was very steep and very thin, with some parts only allowing two people to cross at the same time. However, at the main entrance of the underground chasm itself, the entire thing was as giant as an entire island itself. There was a reason why Teresa and Levi described this thing as a maze. The underground chasm was so big and so expansive that only about 20% of it had been thoroughly explored by humanity. Many of the adventurers who ventured forth to try and strike it rich would find themselves lost in the darkness, unable to get out. And that wasn't considering the dangers laying in wait inside here. The demi-humans could strike anywhere they pleased. They had mastered the underground chasm as if it was their own kingdom, so they were able to take advantage of the small passageways and tunnels that connected through different parts of the chasm. And if you happened to chase after them, they could easily navigate through the maze and cause their pursuers to get lost underground. If that wasn't enough, Michael knew that the demi-humans had another card up their sleeve. The magical monsters. The demi-humans knew where those creatures laid in wait, and they seemed to know exactly what made them tick. So, a little prod here, a little scream there, they could lead those magical monsters to deal with the pursuing adventurers trying to conquer the chasm. That was what Michael was fighting against in this place. Magical monsters, at the same level as a nascent spirit cultivator, Cerberus said to himself. Right beside him was Michael as they made their way underground. That's a bit concerning. Of course, Michael told Cerberus everything he found out during the meeting, and ever the good guy he was, Cerberus offered to go with Reborn to help them. Having a mystic master was definitely a tremendous help. If I didn't know that you were a nascent spirit cultivator yourself, I would have immediately stopped you from going, Cerberus commented. But if those magical monsters, I want you to leave them to me. Michael shook his head. Sorry, but this is going to be a good training opportunity for my army, but if things happen to go wrong, I will request you to help. This time, Cerberus was quite confused. He looked back at the marching army behind them. These Rebornians looked well-armored and dressed, but they weren't as powerful as either of the conglomerate armies, and they had barely survived the last time they went here. I don't remember there being an army the last time I was in your nation. We just recently formed them, with some help. Cerberus nodded. Well, at least whoever helped you is quite competent. There's real coordination with your army's movement, and they looked ready to fight at any moment, which is good. Who's leading them? Michael pointed at the man at the very back of the formation, lagging behind, with his steps dragging through the soil as if he didn't want to be here. That's our general right there, Michael said. A new recruit. Now you know him, Jakku. Hearing this, Cerberus had a double take. What, you mean that's the Dragonborn? Don't tell me, you've evolved them again. Michael signaled for Cerberus to keep his voice low. Yeah, I actually don't know what kind of species they are now. They look human, but their insides are completely different. Yeah, I can tell they're absolute monsters in terms of pure power. I don't think they're lacking when compared to a draconian. Michael nodded. That compliment would have definitely been true if Jakku just locked in and stopped lazing around. He's actually... And just as he was about to say something, they both stopped in their tracks as something entered into their perception. The ground underneath them shook as steps of a giant creature came crashing down on them. It was running at full speed. The Rebornian army immediately tensed. They raised their swords, ready to cut down anything that came their way. Jakku, their general, remained behind them, seemingly not noticing the danger coming their way. A humongous monkey, the size of 2 elephants, came running towards them, jumping through the stalactites and stalagmites on the ground as if they were part of a jungle. Michael's eyes widened. This creature had the same aura of power as those monsters back in New Sparta. Positive, this creature can be classified as a magical monster, Chat JK6 confirmed. She also saw the corpse yesterday, and using Michael's perception, she was able to easily take its physiology and make her own assessments. This creature seemed to be a juvenile, not yet at the same level as a nascent spirit cultivator. And it was injured too. It was holding its bleeding left shoulder, leaving trails of blood on the chasm floor. Michael didn't think they would be seeing a magical monster this soon. I'll take care of this, Cerberus said. But before he could even move, Michael put his hands forward to stop him. Then he gestured with his mouth to look at Jakku. Blue lightning streaked through the darkened cavern of the underground chasm. The magical monkey seemed to have sensed Jakku's arrival, as its eyes immediately turned red as it summoned some kind of green, poisonous mist around its body. It coughed this poison onto the blue lightning before swatting its uninjured hand onto the cloud of poison, intending to crush Jakku underneath. But Jakku was nowhere to be seen. The hairs on the back of the monkey raised up as Jakku appeared behind it, his sword already out of its scabbard. Metal flashed in multiple lines, then it was over. Blood spurted on the monkey's back before it fell face first onto the floor. Jakku landed back on the floor. Damn those two, they've actually conditioned my body to react instinctively to a threat, damn it. Cerberus took in a deep exhale. Every now and again, he's reminded that Michael wasn't the only talented person in his company. Chapter 1290, First Triumph. Cerberus had known about Jakku's talent in swords, but he always thought that the young Dragonborn was an unpolished gem. Yet with what he had shown in that brief instance, he could already tell that Jakku had fixed a lot of the crude aspects of his swordplay. He was starting to look like one of those swordsman knights, one that was incredibly good in the foundational aspects of the sword. But why does he look so dissatisfied? Cerberus asked. Michael laughed. It's because his master's teachings are way too good. Now his body moves without him even thinking about it, so he can't just laze around even if he wanted to. He had seen Eldia and Caliburn force the young Dragonborn out of bed many times before. Every time that he needed to do something like train, his two masters would essentially force him to get up off his lazy behind. Otherwise, he'd be in a world of hurt. They had basically conditioned him to move instead of let his laziness get the best of him. And now, those training sessions had been paying dividends. Oh, he has a master now, great, who are they? It's actually two, Michael corrected. Cerberus took Michael by his shoulders. You know that's dangerous, right? Having two masters will complicate things for the student. They might not even gain mastery over a certain pathway because their focus is going to be divided. Michael nodded. Yes, they knew that, but it's the only way that they were going to be teaching him. Cerberus put his hands on his waist. Who are these irresponsible masters? I would like to have a word with them. Oh, there. But just as he was about to say something, they heard another rumble in the distance. This time there were a lot more footfalls than the first time. Michael used his perception to look at the disturbance. He was able to see an entire army of those magical monkeys coming straight at them. The bad thing was that there must have been about 100 of them in total. But the good news was that they didn't seem as strong as the one that Jakku defeated. They were not only smaller than the monster, about the size of a gorilla, but their individual strengths were also a lot weaker. Michael didn't even have to say anything as his army immediately charged forwards. They seemed completely eager to fight these monsters. Seeing their general fighting that monsters had truly motivated them. His army was divided into divisions and battalions. They separated into their own sections before separating from each other and surrounding the incoming horde of monkeys from all sides. Cerberus couldn't help but be impressed as he saw this. Such professional and swift movements, they could already be compared to the armies of the conglomerates. Then the monkeys arrived. Screaming high-pitched cries, they bared their fangs at the Rebornians. They seemed completely filled with bloodlust after seeing their leader dead right in front of their very own eyes. They wanted to tear these humans into different pieces. And with abandon, these monkeys jumped high into the air and didn't care if they would crash right in the middle of the army formations. 5 distinct sections of the army, each one struggling as 20 or so monkeys jumped into them. The Rebornians held steady, surprisingly. They kept their formations steady as the monkeys assaulted them from above. If they had to retreat to avoid an attack, then their entire sections would move with them, avoiding the monkey. They were like flowing water, avoiding a stone in a river. Michael was impressed, but he knew that this wasn't the best that his army could do. Now that the monkeys had jumped in the middle of the formation, they finally had them where they wanted them to be. Fire erupted from the soldiers' swords, brightening the entire chasm cavern into a hot orange. Cerberus watched intently. It took him a good second before he realized something. Wait, that's not magic. The soldiers' swords billowed out with this powerful flame. Then they began to swing it in a concise pattern, one that was all too familiar to someone like Cerberus. Flames on the tips of the soldiers' swords rose up into the air, creating a cage of fire that enclosed the monkeys into a single space. The monsters thrashed around, but they would be met with severe burns anytime they got too close to the fire. After that, the soldiers became methodical. Their movements became a lot more proactive, a lot more confidence as they changed their stances into something more offensive. It wasn't long before the flames seemed to take a mind of its own. They became like whips, striking down at the monkeys with great force. It became a total massacre for these magical monkeys. Just a few seconds later, the flames died down. 100 monkeys laid on the floor, their brown fur singed and balded. The soldiers resheathed their swords before celebrating this momentous win. They had conquered their first fight. All those training, all those hardships, they had all been proven worth it. "Good job," Michael called out to them. "They're great, aren't they?" he asked Cerberus. But Cerberus seemed just completely stunned at what he had just witnessed. That fire, where did they learn that? "The Lionhearts, they're the ones that helped us create this army." The Lionhearts, the most famous swordsman family in the world, the one sought after by all conglomerates, that Lionheart family. Michael shrugged. "Yeah." Cerberus's jaw was on the floor. Now he knew the reason why Michael was so confident. As it turned out, his army was taught by the very best of them. No wonder he was so brave in letting them go into the chasm. "Caliburn, do you know him? Their patriarch, he is one of Jakku's masters." Cerberus could already tell that Michael would be saying something absurd after that. "And who's the other?" "LDF." Cerberus fell on his knees. And that brings us to the end of this chapter. This is Jason audiobook, and I just want to give a huge thank you to every single one of you for staying all the way through. Whether you're listening to relax, to escape, or to dive deeper into these incredible worlds, your time and support truly mean everything. Every like, every comment, and every share helps this channel grow and allows more stories to come to life in audiobook form. You're not just listeners, you're part of this journey. If you have a web novel you'd love to hear turned into an audiobook, don't hesitate to send me a DM. I'm always looking for new adventures to bring to the channel, and your suggestions could be the next big story we dive into. And if you're enjoying the content and want to support even more, consider checking out the Patreon for exclusive early releases, bonus chapters, and behind-the-scenes content. Once again, thank you for being here. Until the next chapter, stay immersed, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next story.